Now this is the chord I want to show you. And I'm sure you will have heard this kind of thing before. I love using this chord. It's a really nice way to take us back to the home chord, to the one chord, to create that distinctive, rich, soulful sound. Now you might think this sounds a bit too complicated or advanced, and it is a little bit more complicated, but there's still a really simple way to find and play the chord. I'm going to show you that right away. In fact, I've got two versions to show you throughout the video, and then you'll just be able to find this chord easily yourself in any key. But then stick around after that, because I'm going to show you some real examples from songs and explain a bit more about how this chord works, which is important because then you'll get a much better sense of when you can use a chord like this. Especially if you're using things like chord charts, or you're improvising a little bit, or coming up with your own way how to play the chords. There's only two very basic things that you need to remember to find this chord. That's which major chord to play in your right hand, just a normal major chord, and then which bass note to play in your left hand. Now it could be a single note, or you can do octaves. Other than that, you just have to know the key that you're playing in. So we're going to do this in the key of C major first. For the first part then, all we're going to do is play chord number 4 in the key you're in the right hand. We're in the key of C major for now, so we need to play the major chord, which begins from the 4th note of the C major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's F, so we play F major. And then in the left hand, we're not going to play an F. For our lowest note, the bass note, we're going to play the 5th degree of the scale. So from C, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's a G. So we have an F major chord over the top of a G in the bass. We can call this chord an F over G. The F is above it, it's over it. That's how to remember which way round it is, and we can call this a slash chord, F/G. And that's it, that's the chord we're after, and that's the simplest way to find this sound. And you'll often find that this then wants to resolve to the tonic. That's just the one chord in whichever key you're in. So we're in C major, so this chord moves nicely to a C major chord. Another way to find it, if you like, is remember that the bass note is really important, the 5th degree of the scale, and then you play the major chord beginning a whole step below that. So a whole step below G is F, you play an F chord. So just another way to find it. This can often make a really nice substitute for a regular 5 chord, a normal major chord. So instead of playing G major to C, we can swap that out for F over G to C. And that's how we can create that kind of more dramatic, gospel sounding cadence to the one chord. And the reason I'm talking about this with numbers, to give you a kind of formula, if you like, is so that we can repeat the same thing and find that sound in other keys. So let's have a look at how to do that. If we were in the key of F major, we need to reference the F major scale. Then we look at the 4th note of that scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's B flat. So we play a B flat major chord, that's chord 4. And then we play the 5th degree of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in the left hand. So that gives us B flat over C. And that would take us to an F major chord in the key of F major. Or if we were in the key of G major, we look at the G major scale. We'd use chord 4 in the key of G major. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a C, so that's a C major chord. And then the 5th degree of that scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That gives us a C over D. And that's going to take us back nicely to the one chord in the key of G, which is G major. Of course, then, unless you're using sheet music for the exact notes, you're free to play whatever rhythms and patterns suit the song. There's no rules here. It's just the same as the rest of the chords in the song. You need to fit it in with those. This video, though, is really just about finding those notes you need for this sound. Once you know the chord in the right hand, so we've got a C over D here, we can look at the notes in the right hand. So we've got a C, E, and a G, and we can play around with those. We can use different voicings and spread those notes around in different ways and break the notes up into patterns. So the next best thing to try would be your different inversion positions. So we've just started on a basic root position shape here because it's the easiest thing to learn first, but then we could just have some fun with that. It might be good to try doubling the bottom note on the top to create a bigger sound. And then you can break the notes up. There's all kinds of things you can do, like I say, just like any other chord that you're learning in the song as well. It can make a really fun, dramatic ending just by jumping through some inversion positions in your right hand. That was in the key of F major, so at the end we had a B flat over C to take us back to the F. And of course that's a jazz gospel piece of music anyway, where you'll hear that kind of chord a lot. This one is in the key of A flat major. So the 5th degree of the A flat major scale is E flat. There's our bass note. A whole step below that is the 4th degree of the scale, D flat. So we have a D flat over E flat chord. And it's just played in that pattern to create the riff for the song. And that takes us home to the one chord, A flat major. You can use this chord in the chorus of Man in the Mirror.
I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways.
So that guy is a musician who's worked a lot with Michael Jackson, and that's the kind of way that he's playing these chords to add that gospel feel. I'm not completely sure if the album arrangement does exactly this. It's not on piano on the album, but we can certainly play the chords like this on piano. So that was in the key of G major, so we have our C over D chord to take us back to the G. That is the theme tune to the original UK version of The Office, and that is in the key of B flat major. So that song uses an E flat over F. F is the 5th degree of the B flat major scale, and E flat is chord 4. So I've got this E flat shape here, and I'm just playing a melody with it. The piano part on this track, there's lots of patterns and grace notes and things going on, so you can use that on this chord as well. If you take your E flat position in your right hand, and you can do stuff like this. So I'm just taking the chord and I'm playing from the 2nd to the 3rd of the chord. Remember, there's another slightly different variation of this I want to show you at the end. But first, let's have a look at how this works, because that's going to help you understand when to use it. If we go back to the key of C major, in that key we used an F over G. Now, that's a really clear description. It's a really simple chord symbol that you could quickly interpret from a chord chart, for instance. But because we've called it an F over G though, you might be thinking of it as an F chord, but with a different bass note. However, we should really think of it more as a G chord or a 5 chord, because G is the 5th degree of the key we're in, but with some adjustment. We need to think of the note G as the root of the chord, the number 1 of the chord. It's number 5 in the key, but it's the first note, the root of the chord. Essentially, this is a nice way to play a G sus4 sound. So a G sus4 would be this, but with a 7th and a 9th added on. So follow along with me here. This is a G major chord, and it's chord 5 in the key of C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this chord, chord 5, already leads nicely to the 1 chord. But sometimes with this 5 chord, we can add notes to it and adjust things to give us different sounds. So one thing we could do is make this G major a G7 or a G dominant 7 by adding on the 7th. We're adding on the flat 7th in this case, which is a whole step below the octave of G. And there's G, an octave, come down a whole step. So there's one other thing we can do with it. Something we can do with a G major or a G7 is what we call a suspended 4th, and that gives us a different kind of sound essentially. So B was the 3rd, because that's part of the underlying G major triad. That's the major 3rd. 1, 2, 3. And we can move that up a half step to the 4th. So we've swapped the 3rd for the 4th. We've swapped the B for the C. And that sounds really nice as well. It just gives us a different sound that we might want to use sometimes. So this is a G sus4. This is a G7 sus4. It's the G sus4 with the 7 as well. Now you could leave it there. This is kind of the main essence of the chord that we were playing at the beginning. But to add a little bit more colour and create a richer sound, sometimes we add on a 9th as well. So we're getting a bit more advanced now, but that's why we have that easy way to find the chord that I've been showing you. But what is a 9th? Well, if G to G is an octave or an 8th, a 9th is, I'm talking about a major 9th, is a whole step above the G. So that gives us A. It's the same thing as a major 2nd, but an octave above. So now we have the root G, and then we have the 4th, the 5th, the 7th, and the 9th. So this is a G9 sus4. We're going to ignore the 5th. We're going to ignore the D and play a voicing without it. You can omit notes from chords sometimes, although in the other version at the end I mentioned it puts the D back in. So what are we left with? We've got the G in the bass, and then in the right hand we've got C, F, and A. Now if I just move the C up here to make it clearer, that looks like an F chord. Remember, we're in the key of C major, so my left hand has got that G, the 5th degree of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in my right hand, I've found chord 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So really the chord is a G9 sus4, I guess without the 5th, but calling it the 5th degree of the scale with chord 4 in the right hand gives you an easy way to describe and find the chord, to find the 7th, 9th and 4th. So when can you use a chord like this? Well, sometimes it might be written out just like that on a chord chart. You might have F over G written on the chord chart, but sometimes you might find this is a nice way to just add something else to the chords that you've seen written out. Now, it won't always work, but sometimes you can use it just to add that kind of soulful, bluesy feel, just to kind of jazz up the harmony a little bit. So what you're looking out for is when you're on the chord that's the 5th chord of the key. So if you were in the key of C, you need to know that you're playing a G chord. Now if you see it written out as a G sus4, then if you play it as an F over G, you're essentially adding a bit more colour to the chord that you've seen written. You're adding the 7th and the ninth onto the chord that you've seen written out. Of course, you always have to use your judgment whether it fits. Sometimes just the regular G sus4 may be the better option, because sometimes that moves to a G major. It does something like that. It kind of depends on the style of the music that you're playing. Sometimes you can even transform a regular 5 chord, so it might just be a G major written out, and even perhaps just on the last beat of the chord you do something like this. Again, you have to use your judgment whether it fits the music that you're playing or not. Now, there are other times when you can use this voicing, but most often it's going to be when you encounter a chord 5 in the key. So that's why you have to know what key you're in and be aware of that 5th degree of the scale. Okay, so the second way of doing this then, it's not that much more difficult once you understand it. Instead of looking for chord 4 in the right hand, we're going to look for chord 2, and we're going to play 2 as a minor 7. So in the key of C, that would be a D minor 7. So we'd play D minor 7 over G. The same bass note in the left hand, the 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a very similar thing, and all that does is, well, if we look at a D minor 7, in the upper part of the D minor 7, we've got that same F in there, that same 4 chord is kind of hidden in there, and we've got the D, which if you remember, G9 sus4, we had a D in there, didn't we? The 5th of that chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We took that out, and that was left us with an F-looking shape. But if we put that back in, that's actually, these are all notes in a D minor 7. So that's just another way of doing it as well. We just play chord 2 in the key as a minor 7. So if we did that in the key of F major, number 2 is G. So we play a G minor 7, but with the 5th degree of the scale in the bass. So we've got G minor 7 over C. Almost the same thing, it's just a slightly different voicing with that extra note added in as well. I hope that was helpful and you can have some fun with that chord. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Over on Patreon, for supporters of the channel over there, I'm doing an extra video where I'm going to go through finding that chord, both versions, in every key. And let me know in the comments as well, are there any other more sophisticated chords you'd like me to go over on the channel? Thanks for watching.